Everything what you know about IWC Big Pilot is not true. In 1940s, IWC introduces its iconic Big Pilot. Absolutely false statements. Absolutely false. Even the next sentence. Designed with a large onion-shaped crown, it enables pilots to operate. Pilots never operated that crown. Pilots never used this watch. Before I actually explain, let me show you one more very interesting thing. So I have this book called Wristwatches. It was published in 2006. So it kind of has it talks about all major brands. Obviously has a section on IWC. It has all the pictures of all the important watches of IWC. But what's interesting is that it never mentions Big Pilot. Can you imagine that? It's like one of the most iconic, the most important watch lines for the company is never mentioned. There is never the word Big Pilot in the IWC section. There is no picture of the Big Pilot in the IWC section. There is like everything there, but not a Big Pilot. And this was published in 2006. How can it happen that IWC introduced Big Pilot in 1940s, and in 2006, like they didn't even bother mentioning it? Keep watching. Let's start with this watch in the picture. So if we are talking about this watch, we should start with Nazi Germany, right? That's the word you never hear from IWC, Nazi Germany, right? Oh, Nazis, right? Okay. So Nazis had, at its time, they had very powerful military, and important part of the military is Air Force. Nazis' Air Force was called Luftwaffe, and that's what's important. But these two words, Nazis and Luftwaffe, never used by IWC anywhere. Right? Okay, let's go to Luftwaffe. So Luftwaffe had a bunch of pilots, and these pilots needed many things to do their job, including watches, right? And pilots wore this watch, right? No, like why would they wear this watch? Pilots needed chronographs. German Luftwaffe pilots were using famous chronographs made by Hanhart and Tutima. They never used this watch, right? So in addition to pilots, there were people that were less glamorous as pilots. There were people who did not actually fly planes. But they so they were navigators. So what navigator did is, so imagine you're in the middle of the sea, right? So you used your navigation equipment to figure out where you are, where you need to go, like where to, like, I don't know, change course, drop bombs, kind of things like this. So navigators were giving directions to pilots where to go, but they never flew a plane. That's not navigator, right? And navigators, so they also needed watches. So watches were important part of navigation job, because you needed to know very precisely. You needed to know the time to figure out where are you and where you need to go. So Luftwaffe created a specification for the watch for navigators. And basically they invited many brands to actually fulfill that specification and create watches according to that specification. And there were something like 5 or 6, I think five brands. One of them was IWC that was making these watches for Luftwaffe, and the watch was called Luftwaffe B-Uhr. So what's important is the watch was called B-Uhr. It wasn't called Big Pilot, it was called B-Uhr. Okay, so that's basically the watch, right? Let's get so important things about this. The watch was designed by Luftwaffe, like that was specification by Luftwaffe. Like if IWC or other of the 5 brands would come up with their own design, that would be rejected. Like Luftwaffe wouldn't buy that watch. It had to be watch exactly how Luftwaffe told you it should be, right? It wasn't just IWC. There were other brands like Langer, for example, or Laco that were making these watches, and IWC didn't do anything special. They just did the same thing as other brands. They just fulfilled the contract, right? So that watch B-Uhr was never used by pilots because it had, like, why would pilots need this watch? This is watch for different people, for navigators, right? Also, nobody ever called it the Big Pilot, right? That was B-Uhr. The other interesting thing is everybody knows that the watch was big and it had this strap, so you should be able to wear it over your leather jacket, right? But what is more important is that the watch should be big enough so you can wear it on your leg. So navigators often, like here you have like your navigation instruments, you do like your calculations, and on your leg you have your actually another navigational instrument is your Luftwaffe B-Uhr watch, right? So you use this watch and use other instruments to basically do your job. But that watch wasn't a wristwatch. That was this giant 55 millimeters plate that like it wasn't designed to, like, nobody ever wore it on a wrist, like maybe either over your leather jacket, but mostly on your leg. That's what was important, is you should be able to wear this watch on the leg. So this was more kind of the leg watch. Okay, so as you know, Nazis lost the war, and that's it. And after that silence, nobody is making these B-Uhrs, not IWC, not LACO, not anybody. And basically there is nothing until 2002. Okay, so in 2002, IWC ended up with a stock of a very large, more like pocket-sized movements, because they were experimenting with making their own in-house movements at that time, and the experiment was actually successful. The movements were good, so they ended up with these movements. They didn't know what to do with them, so the movements were pretty large. And at that time, it wasn't the period of this like giant watches just yet, but they had these giant movements, so they could have made pocket watches, but they knew that pocket watches wouldn't sell. So they had an idea, okay, let us make this like giant watch, but let us still like it's possible, despite that the movement is big, to make a wristwatch. So they made these 46 millimeter watches that were like still, even at that time, they were like giant, but it was still a wristwatch. Like you could still wear it on your wrist. If you're a larger gentleman, you have a larger wrist, it's still like it would look like almost ridiculous, but still kind of like doable, you know, not like the original 55 millimeter plate which B-Uhr was, right? Like there's huge difference between 46 millimeters and 55 millimeters. Okay, so they decided to do this very big watch, but now what that watch would look like? So they remembered that Luftwaffe specifications, so they took Luftwaffe dial, they took Luftwaffe strap, and it kind of like looked okay. So they wanted to give it a try to make this watch. And the watch ended up being a success, but it seems like it was a slow success, because even like in 2006, right? So they made it in 2002. Even in 2006, these guys don't even bother mentioning this watch, right? So it took some time, but by now that is a big famous watch. Like everybody knows about Big Pilot, but obviously at that time nobody knew about it. But where we are going with this? So the important part is, does Big Pilot have history, right? And my opinion is no. That's a modern watch. That's a watch that they created in 2002, and there was nothing between 2002. Like, if they would want to say that they reissued B-Uhr, right? So first of all, they need to talk about Nazis and Luftwaffe, right? There's no B-Uhr without Luftwaffe. Right? Second, what the hell is Big Pilot? Like, if you would want to say this is a successor of B-Uhr, you should call it B-Uhr, right? Like, you should not call it something very, very different, right? I understand if they would call it, let's say they would call it Luftwaffe B-Uhr Mini, right? That makes sense, right? That's a, like, they would still need to explain why, since Germany lost the war until 2002, there was nothing, right? But still, like, okay, they reissued that watch and some, but like they did not do it. They called the watch Big Pilot, right? Now the very, very weird thing is why did they take this navigation design and they call the watch Big Pilot? First of all, why did they call it big? Like, that's a mini. Like, that, if this is B-Uhr, that's a small pilot, right? But because B-Uhr was much larger. Second, why is it's not a pilot, right? Like, that it should be Navigator, right? Another thing, like, it wasn't a leg watch, right? That's a wrist watch. It's a little bit weird. And also, if that's B-Uhr, then all the other 4 brands have a total right to create your Big Pilots, right? Laco can create Big Pilot, and they can call this watch a Big Pilot, right? Because they have the same right to use Luftwaffe specification as you can, right? Because they made it, you made it. Lange will create their own Big Pilot, and that's it, right? So again, in like, that makes no sense. Like, this watch has no history. That's the Big Pilot is the watch created in 2002. That's a modern watch, and now because it was created in 2002, you cannot call it iconic watch, because this watch, like, if you have an iconic watch, it needs to have history. It needs to be produced for very, very long time to earn this iconic status. But Big Pilot is not iconic. It's a modern watch. It's super successful right now. It's a good watch. It's a cool watch if you have a big wrist. But who knows? Maybe in the near future people will hate it and it will die and everybody will forget about it. The same way how people forgot about B-Uhr, right? It's not. And there's another thing that makes me mad. How the hell are you making Big Pilot Heritage Edition? What kind of it? It's like heritage of what? Right? The Big Pilot has no heritage. It's a modern watch. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more videos like this about history, about vintage watches, click over here or over here, I forgot, on my face. Click subscribe, like this video. If you hated this video, still like this video. Thank you, bye.